Unmute myself. There we go. Okay, let's call this meeting to order of the Carver School Committee on March 28th, 2020 at 3:08. Could I have everyone give the roll? I am Andy Cardarelli, Chairman of the Carver School Committee.
Andrew Salavota, Vice Chair.
You have to unmute yourself.
Jason Greenwood.
James O'Brien.
Stephanie Clarity.
Okay.
And then just in terms of other participants, Scott Neef, Superintendent, Carver Public Schools.
Meredith Cargill Erickson, Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Technology.
Brad Brothers, Chief Financial Officer.
Okay, Andy, do you want to have us do the pledge? You have to unmute yourself, Andy.
Hello. Sorry about that. Can you see me still?
Yep, we can see you.
All right, I can't get back to my screen for some reason. Why don't you join me with the Pledge of Allegiance? I'll hold up a flag. I have a flag here, actually. All right, so if you'd like to join me, I appreciate it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, individual with liberty and justice for all. Jeez, started and stammer over myself. Okay. Everyone's still, Scott, everyone is still
muted except for you and I.
Still muted for now? Okay. The screen is getting me mixed up here. All right.
James O'Brien raised his hand. James?
I think it was still raised from the trial.
Oh, okay, sorry about that. So James, in the functionality, if you go in and take your hand down, same place, if you go to participants, you'll see a little section to take your hand. There you go. Thank you. Go ahead, Andy.
No, okay.
So Andy, you were muted again. So if you're going to ask for comments from the general public and comments from the APC again, that would be great. Sorry.
Right. Well, we'll go to the comments from the APC because there are no general public members here.
So Tom or Tammy, I don't know if you want to say anything.
I definitely would. This is Tammy Johnson, Vice President of the EAPC for Carver. Just wanted to say that it's been a whirlwind. I know everybody's lives have been basically turned upside down. And I just wanted to say, like, the administration, all the educators, the community, there's been actually teachers and educators volunteering at the Shane's Give Thanks. And it's this incredible time and stressful time. I'm just so proud to be part of a community that is pulled together to try to take care of each other, both for their safety and their health and social needs. And then also with this, I know we're going to be talking about a memorandum. We worked very hard on trying to come to an agreement. We have a joint labor management committee that's been working again really hard. It's been a large group, and democracy can be very messy, is what I've been learning throughout these years. But it's also been coming, I think we have come together with with our common goal of to try to provide the best opportunities we can for our students under these stressful times. So I just want to just say I have a lot of appreciation for the hard work.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, thank you, Tim.
Tom, I'm not sure if you were upset. Okay, I think we're ready to move on, Andy.
Okay, so go to the general reports from the superintendent, general update on the school closure.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cardarelli. So I want to just kind of give an overview of what's happened over the last few weeks, because I thought that would make sense leading into the memorandum of agreement and just giving the committee and the community some background on what's been happening. So when schools first closed, the guidance from the Department of Education was to provide students and families with a list of resources that they can access to maintain skills and review previously learned content. We developed such a list and published it on the first Monday we were closed. The message we sent to students and teachers, which followed the Department of Education guidance was to encourage but not require students to do any specific work. Some of our teachers went above and beyond that standard, but not necessarily all teachers did that. And I just want to take a moment to give some examples of that. So we have been having teachers who've actually been doing some online Zoom meetings or Google Meet meetings, sort of like we're doing here, where they've actually run some classes, done some book clubs, had some conversations. Teachers have been sending kids specific work. Teachers have been reaching out to students and making connections with them and their families. So there has been a lot that's been going on beyond just the content list of resources. And I wanted to thank the teachers for doing that and for being active in really trying to make connections with kids. I also wanted to emphasize that my position throughout this process so far has really been to follow the guidance that's been laid out to us from the Department of Education, and that's what we've been trying to do. But ultimately, now that we're moving towards having when it became evident that we're going to have a longer term closure, we've begun to plan for a more robust system, a more identified system in terms of what we're going to ask teachers and students to do during this time. So starting last week, the union requested that we meet and begin to work on a memorandum of agreement, which we've come up with, as Tammy said, and we spent a lot of time on this week, and we'd like to have the committee review and hopefully approve. As Tammy said, we also began to meet with teachers and staff to discuss what remote learning is going to look like. And we're still basing our plan based on the DESE guidance, which was released this past Thursday. So my next step would be to I'm going to pull up that DESE guidance and kind of go through it to say, this is what your remote plan should look like. And these are guiding principles, and they're saying they want to leave autonomy to local school districts to talk about how they're going to implement this guidance, implement these overall principles. So the next document I'm going to pull up is the letter from the Commissioner of Education, Jeff Riley, and that outlines the guiding principles. I won't read the whole document to you, but I'll kind of hit on the key points from the document. So it just starts with just an opening letter. I won't read the letter to you, but I'll go down to the guiding principles and kind of hit the bullet points from the guiding principles. So guiding principles: support student learning and holistic needs. Districts and schools must continue to focus on the holistic needs of the educational community. The safety and well-being of students, families, and staff has been and must continue to be our top priority as educators. This crisis disproportionately affects our most vulnerable students in terms of their physical and mental health, and also academically. Equity needs to be a top consideration in local planning efforts, especially as districts and schools make plans to manage or extend closure. Maintaining connections between school staff and students is paramount, particularly for our most vulnerable members of our school community. And I'll pause here just because I said that I think a lot of teachers have been doing a lot of different things. And, so some other examples of that. I know Mr. Schultz, as the high school principal, actually had a meeting with the senior class yesterday to address some of their concerns. He's met with student council officers. Some specific teachers, as I said, have been running classrooms. I know there's an elementary teacher who actually has been inviting her students to have lunch with her. So they've been doing virtual lunches. And a lot of those things that have been happening have been based upon that concept of maintaining connections between students and teachers, which is a focus on the guidance. Moving on to the guidance, if someone has a question or wants to add something in, certainly you can raise your hand, but if not, I'll just keep going through the guidance. At this time, districts and schools must also work to adopt a remote learning model, which is what we're currently doing. And our MOA that we're going to look at today is kind of the beginning point of that move towards adopting a remote learning model. Nothing can replace the in-person schooling experience. We should not expect that remote learning can replicate the traditional school day. At the same time, with school closures now extending, district schools and communities have an obligation to engage students in meaningful and productive learning opportunities. And that's our goal, is to develop a plan in which we're going to be able to engage students in meaningful and productive learning opportunities. A key point, which I know Commissioner Riley actually talked about in his press conference announcing the last closure, is remote learning is not always synonymous with online learning. Remote learning can take place in multitudes of ways. And remote learning might just be opportunities or ideas for families to do things together such as the examples he gave in the press conference was putting a recipe together and making a meal or making a snack or making baking or going out in the yard and learning how to plant flowers. That a lot of it can be really hands-on learning, and maybe we can help guide some of that as well. So that was part one, was like global overview. Part two, specific guidance on development and implementing a remote learning plan. And that's the term we're going to use because it's DESI's term. And I think remote learning plan is a good concept versus online or virtual learning, saying that this can happen in a multitude of ways. Planning for and implementing remote learning models. If district schools have not already developed a remote learning model, they should take time to engage in a thoughtful planning period, which we're currently doing. So we started that last week with the development of the MOA. In the MOA, we're going to find out that we agreed to this Joint Labor Management Committee, which I know the committee hasn't approved the MOA and the membership of the EAPC hasn't approved the MOA yet. That's good. They're voting on it on Monday. But we felt like we wanted to get this Joint Labor Committee going. So that group's already started to meet. And the goal of that group is to engage in that thoughtful planning period of what we want our remote learning plan to look like. Above all, we recognize that district schools and teachers are best positioned to develop plans to meet their students' needs, and that these needs may change over the course and the extended closure. And one of our thoughts on that in terms of having this Joint Labor Management Committee, it's a group that's going to be made up of teachers and administrators. And that group, the thought process is, we're not, right now we're coming back to school May 4th, but there's a chance that this closure could be extended beyond May 4th and possibly all the way through the end of the school year. So we want this group to be flexible to respond to the changes that come over the course of this closure in line with the guidance from the Department of Education. So some of the recommendations for a remote learning model. DESI recommends that districts support students to engage in meaningful and productive learning for approximately half the length of their regular school day, which for us would be about 3 hours a day. We expect this learning to take place via a combination of educator-directed learning and self-directed learning. We strongly recommend that districts and schools focus on reinforcing skills already taught and applying and deepening those skills. And I think that's going to be a huge piece of our discussion as we go forward. It already has been. That whole concept of, are teachers teaching new material, or are they just reinforcing skills and deepening skills? And some of the discussion that's happened around that concept is there's been a general feeling that maybe at the elementary school, it's going to be easier to say reinforce skills, deepen skills, especially if it's focused around early literacy and math. But that may be more difficult for the high school English teacher or the high school math teacher to say, we're just going to keep reinforcing what we've already done. And maybe there does have to be some decisions to have some newer, to some different content, or even content tied to what's happening in society currently. One of our high school English teachers was talking about the concept of building some reflection and analysis of how we as a country are responding to COVID-19. Clearly, that would be new material, but would make sense that the kids look at that as a high school English class and read some of the things out there in the news and have it be current events based. So I do think we haven't settled on a definition of saying no, we're only going to reinforce skills. It might be a combination, but I wanted to highlight this DESI recommendation that it focus on reinforcing skills and applying and deepening skills. I also want to talk a little bit about why that is. There's a general thought process of it goes back into the beginning of that concept of equity, and that reality is some students need different levels of supports. Some students may not be able to access the remote learning in the same way that other students are, and we're trying to address that equity issue by passing out Chromebooks, but that doesn't meet all of our equity. The reality is there are families in the community who still don't have the internet. There are families in Carver who didn't have technology. So this past Thursday and Friday, we passed out over 130 Chromebooks. And I know I'm kind of rambling here a bit, but I wanted to thank the members of the technology committee because they did a technology team, Stephen Mahoney, Candy Barry, Brian Mahoney. They did a great job preparing all those devices. Gina did a lot of the organization for that as well. In terms of getting those devices out to families. And we're still getting, I got a couple of query requests today of families saying, hey, we don't have a good device, and whatever, we realize now it's going to be different in terms of remote learning. Can you help us access the device? And we are helping families do that. But even the internet connection, we found out there were, I think, close to 15 families who said they don't have an internet connection in their home. We're working with them in terms of Comcast. And Comcast is offering free internet right now, and some of those families are actually being set up this weekend, I believe. But there's a lot of complexities here when you start looking at the concept of equity and student access. And that's why DESE is making this recommendation that school districts focus on reinforcing skills and deepening skills versus teaching a lot of new content, because they think that not teaching a lot of that new content helps maintain that equity in terms of students' educational experiences. And that's kind of the rationale or the thought process behind that. And I didn't even I just touched on the concept of computers and internet access. I didn't even get into special ed and the levels of supports students need through special education services in terms of maintaining equity. So that I wanted to touch on that concept of why. And I don't know if people in the community or members of the committee are saying, why is DESE making such a big push that we only reinforce skills, but not necessarily teach a lot of new material during this remote learning phase? Sorry, I went off on a bit of a tangent on that concept. But I haven't seen anybody raise their hands yet, so everybody seems to be okay with me just going through. And then obviously the same concept, they're saying individual students' experience will vary depending on the student's age, family, supports, and again, not that we need to deal with every complexity, but we are dealing with a range of complexities. I had a family at the end of the week reach out to me saying, my husband and I are still essential workers. We're going to work every day, and I know a lot of people are working remotely, but they're leaving the home and going to work, and they have a 15-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And in essence, the 15-year-old's in charge of the 7 and the 2-year-old while they're going to work. And they said that that's going to be hard for him to do his work while he has those expectations. So there's a lot of things we have to. Obviously, there's a lot of different individual circumstances we have to look at, but we have to at least acknowledge those things as we develop our plan. Andrew, I see your hand going up.
Hey, I had a quick question about the reinforcement. Personally, I don't like it. I just think that we're, in essence, teaching down to our lowest. That's just my opinion. For 10 weeks, that sets you way behind to start off the next year if we're just going to go back and basically say that these 10 weeks didn't happen. So how does it affect going forward for next year if we were to look at it and say we're going to backtrack and basically just give work that's in essence already happened just in a different way? How does that affect next year?
I think the teachers do a great job of meeting students where they are, and I do think that it's going to have an impact, and something we're going to have to consider in terms of did they actually meet all the grade level expectations? And I really think we're going to see how this plays out. We haven't also finalized our remote learning plan, and I do think that there are. I think there's going to be a little bit of a push of doing some more new content. And so I think there might be a balance there in terms of what we strike in terms of what we're going to do going forward. But it's a legitimate concern. I don't know, Meredith, not to put you on the spot, I don't know if you have a thought about that or a response to that in terms of, saying that, it is something we're going to have to deal with. And I just think we as educators and teachers are going to do a great job in terms of meeting kids where they are and moving them forward.
I would agree with what you've said. I think, this is an unprecedented experience for all of us. And we know that there's significant research out there that talks about when students have interruption in their education, whether it's over the course of a summer vacation or something more long-term due to some extenuating circumstance. So I think, like Mr. Neef said, we have to see how some of this plays out. I do appreciate that the state is trying to be mindful of all these different challenges and experiences that families have. And I feel like that's where our commitment is as a district team of managers and of educators to try to make sure that we're coming to some sort of agreement to meet every learner where they're at.
All right. So moving on in terms of the expectations, Andrew, I don't know if you have a follow-up thought on that, or it's going to be a challenge. Some of the things we have talked about is we have been talking about maybe we might have to look at doing summer school a little bit differently in terms of students. We feel like there's been some concerns that they haven't moved forward as where they need to go. So that's something we're going to have to consider and think about as we move forward. And then I also, like I said, I think there's going to be a mix of it. And I also think that especially at so I mentioned the elementary level in terms of literacy and math, especially literacy, I think teachers are going to have kids doing reading and improving those literacy skills and doing a lot with them to move those skills forward, which it really is a little bit of reinforcement, but it's building that skill and moving it forward. Andrew.
No, I totally do understand what you're saying, but I'm kind of looking at it. I believe I'm looking at it from the teacher's point of view, and in the sense of you're trying to engage with these kids, and if you're looking at it, and half of your class has already moved on from something, and you are looking ahead to where am I going with the next month possibly, and to say that you're going to backtrack, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for everyone involved to be motivated, and then for the following year. A teacher is going to be looking at their lesson plan. They're going to now have to backtrack and say, all right, well, I gotta worry about the fact that the last 8 weeks of the school year, him or her might not have learned anything. So they're not ready for me. They're not ready for where I'm going to pick up at. So they've got to backtrack, and we don't know. Maybe they're still having to meet the same time frames as far as testing and stuff for next year. But now they're working 8 weeks behind. I mean, that just puts them in a very tough spot, which I do understand. At the time we're in right now, which is quote unquote unprecedented and all that, I do get it that we have to figure out something, but I just feel like it puts a lot of stress next year on the teachers to play a big game of catch up if we just let everything just level off because we're worried about the bottom group of students not being able to catch up during this unprecedented time.
And I don't know if we can always refer to it as from that perspective. Because I also think there's reality of kids who might be really strong students who also can't access it for some reason, whatever that reason is. Like I just gave the family of the 15-year-old who's taking care of his two younger kids all day, his younger brothers and sisters, and his educational experience may not be the same as everybody was in school, and he might be a really strong student, and it may have impacts on him. So I think we have to see how it plays out. I think that might become a better discussion in terms of when we actually finalize our remote learning plan, which we haven't yet, when we talk about whether we're going to be looking to move students forward and give some more information. I also see that Jason and James raised their hands. So Jason or James? Jason, no, James?
Jason, go ahead, man.
No, I put my hand down. I'll wait. You guys can go ahead.
James?
Well, I just kind of wanted to speak as an educator in this aspect for Andrew, I think, because there's a lot of different perspectives that are out there right now. And I think to Scott's point, this is in a couple points. Number one, this is much harder on secondary ed than it is on elementary ed, because in elementary ed, it's really conceptually based a lot. And it's just giving them other things to do to practice some of those skills that they've already been working on through the year. And with them, it's a lot about building habits and consistencies. And there's still some of that can be done. I think math might be a concern, but I think that's going to be a general concern overall. So everybody's going to have to figure out how to deal with that aspect of it. With secondary, I don't know. I think that's going to be difficult because there's a lot of specific content that they are going to be missing and needing to move on with. So I do see both sides.
And I think at the secondary level, there's a chance there's going to be some new content.
It's hard to give new content. And from my perspective, if I invite a Zoom out for my class and 10 kids show up or 12 kids show up, it's not, there's an equity situation where I don't know why those other kids aren't there. So I can't just be giving out new information to the only kids who decide to show up. It just doesn't, I also get that perspective strongly.
And it will be interesting to see because, there's been some numbers thrown out there that I've heard just in conversation, both at the state level and the local level, about what's going to be students' level of participation. Is it going to be 75%? Is it going to be 80%? And why isn't that other 20% participating? And we already started to hit on some of those things, and it's going to be interesting to see when we actually start to do it. And we've had some varied experiences. So we've had, like I said, we've already had some teachers try to do some Zoom lessons, some Zoom activities, and some of them have had some real good turnout, and some of them have had maybe not as strong in terms of their turnout. But even our senior class meeting yesterday, I think there was over 80 kids on that call, which was great. Andy, I'm actually going to ask you a question because we're in a little bit different setting here as a remote setting. And the other thing that I also feel like we shouldn't be using, so I should have said this at the beginning of the meeting, we should not be using the chat function, and maybe I need to disable it. This is a public meeting, so not everybody can see that chat. So people should not be using the chat conversation to have conversations back and forth, because that wouldn't be happening in the public setting where we'd be going back and forth and having side conversations. The other thing I want to ask Andy is there's a teacher who's on the call as a member of the audience who's raised their hand. Normally, necessarily in the meeting setting, as the chair, you'd make a determination on whether we'd call on that person to weigh in or not. So I'm going to defer to you, Andy, on whether we call on. So Jackie Perkins, a teacher from Carver Middle High School, has raised her hand, and I'm going to ask you to make a determination whether we should call on her, because again, we're looking to follow the same structures as we would follow during our public meeting.
That's why I raised my hand my virtual hand, I should say. I don't have any, usually we don't allow this, but I don't have any problem with a short comment. Tammy and Jackie both had something they wanted to say on the subject, and because we're in uncharted territory, I think we can allow it this time. I don't know if we want to make it a regular. Yeah, because ultimately, as usual in the school committee process, it's not necessarily a dialogue back and forth right. during the session of the meeting. But I defer to you as the chair to make that decision. So you're saying allow Jackie and Tammy to weigh in at this time. Yeah. I'm fine with that, absolutely. Just want let's do that for this time, and we'll probably end it there. And I don't want it to be a back and forth discussion. Yeah. So if you want to make a comment or have a question. And my fault in the beginning about the chat, I meant to mention to not use the chat function during the public meeting session. Okay, so I just don't want this to be a debate. That's the only thing, So Jackie Perkins, I'll call on Jackie.
Thank you very much for letting me speak. I just wanted to respond to Andrew Solowata's point and his concerns. I have run an online class that is remote and interactive between students and the online class. I did it with my AP kids over last summer as part of their summer work. I did it over the fall with the honors students for 2 different sections for composition through nonfiction. And my students are doing it right now. And unless I bring that into the classroom, what I have found at the end of their taking that course and giving it the time that they should give it, they don't have near the mastery that they would have if they were in the classroom with me. So there are a whole bunch of concerns about significant new content in terms of how do you assess that when we're in this sort of learning environment. And I don't doubt that new content is going to be involved, but I think that for all subjects, except for the AP ones that have specific content, that even those classes, the AP has said that they're not going to test on any content that would have gone past mid-March. So, and at the same time, they've offered an online platform to review and do things like that. So it's not that it's not that DESE is catering to the lowest or the bottom of our students in terms of their wealth and accessibility or in terms of their academic performance. It's about what's really realistic in expectations with our students. we are engaged in teaching them skills all year long at every grade level. And every single one of those skills can be used in the enrichment opportunities and the things that we will be asking them to do from now until May 4th or June 25th. And so it's really about keeping those skills sharp, keeping them engaged. The critical thinking, the reading, and the organizational skills are all really paramount to all of it. So no matter what happens, when we start in September, teachers are going to be hit with having to raise students up as far as they possibly can. And we're going to do that no matter what. So I wouldn't be too concerned, and I wouldn't want it for my family and my children if their teachers were trying to impose a whole bunch of new learning on them when their worlds are pretty much turned upside down. And there's now 3 different people with an office in the house trying to get things done. So it's not about playing to the bottom. It's really about caring for everybody and saying, fine, we got a glitch. And for everybody, we have a glitch. And we're going to pick up wherever we can, as soon as we can, and do our best to minimize that glitch. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jackie. Tina, do you have something?
Oh,
I'll be super quick. I just wanted to reiterate, it's just something that Jackie said that the DESE guidelines had mentioned in the beginning. Remote learning, it is not synonymous with online learn. That's not what I wanted to say. Nothing can replace the in-person schooling experience is what my point is. So James is completely correct. That
not to cut you off, Tammy, I purposely went to that section of the commission's letter so people can see on their screen.
Oh, okay.
I'm actually going to do the same thing, Tammy. I was going to read that paragraph.
Oh, okay. It's on the top, right?
I just highlighted it if you want to read it.
Yeah, okay.
So
number
no,
one.
I lied to you.
I know. I have it in front of me, so that's why. So at this time, districts and schools must also work, right, Scott?
I was going to his letter that says remote learning cannot replace students' experiences in school communities with teachers and administrators.
I don't know why I'm showing it to you, but it's also in the guidelines too.
Yeah. All right. Go ahead, Terry. Go ahead. You can go. I didn't mean to cut you off.
All right. So I'm reading in a different spot. But it says the same thing. It's underneath. At this time, districts and schools must also work to adopt a remote learning model. This is the second thing under number 1. Nothing can replace the in-person schooling experience, and we should not expect that remote learning can replicate the traditional school day. So I was just going to say, James was completely right. Like this is like a complicated, incredibly complicated situation that we are working really hard on trying to simplify it as much as we can and create an environment where we're being supportive. And in all honesty, I think you're right. There's there's clearly going to be a lot of content and skills that students aren't going to get like in the regular classroom, but I think it's a new way of looking at it. And I think our students, I'm looking at it, are going to be learning very valuable lessons outside of what the curriculum is, whether it's more things at home or like how to do things more self skills or understanding your environment, learning. There's just, honestly, I guess I'm looking at it as an educator as an opportunity to do things different and look at things in a different way. So that was my point. Thanks.
I'm going to go back to where I was on the guidance, if that's okay with everybody. So we were at actually definition and scope of remote learning. Remote learning can encompass a wide variety of learning opportunities. We've already talked about that a little bit. Examples of remote learning tools include large group video and audio calls like we're doing, one-to-one phone or video calls, email, work packets, projects, reading lists, online platforms, and other resources to effectively engage students. Components of an online learning schedule, what they're recommending that we look at as we build ours is opportunity to connect with one or more educators multiple times per week, access to multiple hours per day of academic content directed by educators, time each day for some physical activity, additional daily time for enrichment activities such as the arts, dance, media, etc. And that kind of brings us down through the end of the guidance that DESE has put out for us. So from that guidance, we've begun to meet in this Joint Labor Management Committee, and we've developed some expectations for next week. And I put together a letter that's went out to the community. I think the whole committee has seen the letter, so you got that as well yesterday. Not necessarily, I had the letter here, but I'm not going to necessarily pull it up and read through it to you. But we did identify some basic expectations for next week. And our thought process is next week is a transition as we continue to work on a more formalized remote learning plan. But we wanted to make a little bit of a shift from the original guidance of here's some resources and why don't you encourage kids to use those resources, or maybe give them some direction on using those resources. So the expectations that we kind of agreed to yesterday are a little bit different from that. And I just wanted to give the committee an update on where we were with those expectations, and then say that this was really just for next week. And some of these things may be incorporated into the larger remote learning plan that we're developing, but I wanted to share those expectations as I did with a letter to the community yesterday. And so I'll read through it quickly, and then we'll move forward or take questions. Just want to see if there's any hands. Don't see any hands right now. So at the middle high school, teachers will communicate with all students of what work they need to complete term 3. This would not include any new assignments. Grades for term 3 will be closed as of April 7th. Teachers, special education inclusion teachers will collaborate on prioritizing missing work and setting timelines for completion. So at the middle high school, we're actually saying we're going to close out term 3. And there are some students who had some work missing that now they're going to have the opportunity to make up. There are some teachers who had given some assignments, and the assignment may have been due during this closure. So we're saying, yes, you need to finish those assignments. And we're going to ask teachers to reach out to their classes, make a connection with their class, and say, this is what you need to do to end term 3. And we actually think that was a logical step to take, because we were close enough to the end of term 3. Term 3 was actually scheduled to end, I believe, on April 7th anyhow. And so it made sense to kind of close that out and then start next week, the week of April 6th, with our new remote learning plan, and that whatever that would constitute term 4, whatever we agree to do during that time. So that, there might be a student at the middle high school who is all caught up, has done everything, is good, and their grade's going to be closed out. There are going to be other kids who are going to have some opportunity to catch up and get some work in to finalize their grade 3 work. Teachers will communicate their availability directly to students and parents and respond to questions, concerns in a timely manner during school hours. Teachers could offer enrichment, extension, connection opportunities to students, saying that obviously beyond just closing out term 3, if teachers wanted to make other connections next week, they could certainly do that, and we'd encourage them to do that if they chose to. And then teachers are going to participate in a team and or departmental level meeting. So the departments are going to meet next week and start, I think, have discussions about, get everybody's input on what they think a remote learning plan would look like best for their department at the middle high school level, and also the teams in 6th and 7th grade. Any questions in middle high school? I do not see any hands raised, so I'll go on. The elementary school, teachers will communicate their availability, and we're going to see this language in each one, directly to students and parents to respond to questions and concerns in a timely manner during school hours. Teachers should participate in grade level meetings. The reading and math coach and special education inclusion teachers may join those meetings. So same thing as we kind of said at the middle high school, the grade levels are going to get together and start planning, what the remote learning plan is going to look like, and giving that information back to the Joint Labor Management Committee. Teachers or grade levels will offer at least one class or grade level face-to-face communication. I didn't say that well, so I'll say it again. Teachers and or grade levels will offer at least one class or grade level face-to-face communication live or recorded. A read aloud, a morning meeting, lunch. Like I said, I know there's that elementary teacher who said that she's been having lunch with her students through like a Google Meets or through a Zoom. So we're going to say that teachers will attempt one of those offerings next week. By Wednesday, teachers will communicate to students and families at least 4 assignments, activities for students to complete using current communication methods. Teachers will determine the content of the assignments. Specialists will communicate 1 optional assignment activity for students to complete during the week. So that's your art, phys ed, music. They're going to send out an assignment for each kid as well that they could participate in. And then term-wise, the elementary school was actually just finished up term 2. So teachers are going to complete their term 2 report cards, and special ed teachers will complete their term 2 progress reports by the end of the week, Friday, April 2nd, 2020. And then those report cards will actually get distributed by the administration the next week. Therapists and counselors. I got a couple hands. Jason.
Just for the record, Friday's April 3rd.
Oh.
And what would be your guidance on if a parent or a family does not hear from the teacher?
If someone doesn't hear from any of their teachers and had no contact, they should contact the administration or myself. Andy, do you have your hand raised, or has your hand just been raised?
Oh, did I not take it down? No, I didn't take it down. Sorry.
All right, not a problem.
My fault.
And I'll make the correction on April 3rd. It's a live document. There we go. Therapists will communicate their availability, same concept, availability directed to students and parents, and respond to questions and concerns. Therapists will participate in support staff departmental meetings. Therapists will access Enable My Child platform. It's a platform that Karen's actually investigated. Karen's on the call. She could talk more about it. But it actually gives the opportunity for a therapist to do some online therapy sessions. So then it says therapists, your speech, language, OT, PT. Therapists will provide at least 2 online therapy, small group or individual sessions, and begin working on a schedule for future sessions with the kids that they're working with. And I'm gonna touch on this pace a little bit. In the very beginning, and because this is an ever evolving situation, the guidance actually at the federal level in terms of special ed, therapists, counselors, was that if you're not providing a full school experience, in essence, if you're not trying to replicate your school day, then the FAPE requirement, free appropriate education, for special ed students does not apply. And in essence, we're saying you are not required to offer special ed services. And so what happened was some districts were saying, well, we're going to try to, this is my interpretation of what happened, is some districts were trying to say, well, we don't want to get ourselves close to creating a virtual day or recreating the school day for a lot of reasons, but one of them being, if we do, then we have to meet all the special ed regulations that are currently in students' IEPs, and if we don't, we could have to offer compensation, in essence, compensatory services for kids after we return to school. And also, technically under the law, would actually open you up to possible litigation saying you were offering school but not offering those services. And there was a lot of conversation about that in the special ed world at both the state and federal level. So what's happened in the past week is the federal government has come out with guidance saying, well, we're backing away from our statement of if you don't provide a full school, if you're not recreating the school day, you don't have to offer any special ed services. It's almost a guidance of you should try to offer some special ed services during this time. That some is better than nothing. And in essence has pulled away that concept of districts having to be responsible for compensatory services. And that guidance has changed in the past week or two. And is basically saying, yeah, you have a responsibility to be offering some level of special ed services to your students. And that's why it ties into, so Karen's been working hard on this in terms of, trying to get some platforms where our therapists could do some online therapies with kids. And she's done a lot of work in that area, and the therapists are going to begin to do that. Our ESPs, paraprofessionals, ESPs will have a group Zoom meeting with Karen and the principals, and ESP is going to participate in training on technology platforms used with their students, like a Zoom, like a Google Meets, so that they're going to learn and have access to the systems that we might be using with students in a remote learning environment. And then finally was the special needs teachers, severe special needs teachers. And these are some of our profound special ed students. And a lot of the things here, I know one of the teachers who's part of our joint labor management group said, a lot of this is already happening. And they've made a lot of connections with their families. Obviously they tend to have smaller classes, smaller number of kids, and a lot of contact with those families because of the intense needs of some of the students. But it just teachers will communicate their availability, participate in 2 meetings with other severe special needs teachers, create an individual support plan for each student based on conversations with parents, attempt at least 1 virtual live recorded telephone session with students. And as I said, a lot of that the severe special needs teachers are saying is already happening right now. So this is kind of our overview of what's going to happen next week, which I outlined for the community. And we're going to continue to move forward and develop our remote learning plan, which is discussed in our MOA. So at this time, I don't know if there's any questions in terms of where we are. If not, I will move on to the MOA. I'll wait a second.
Does anybody have anything? No? I just want to say I am obviously not a professional in this, a teacher or anything, but we're all going through this same thing, and it's a scary time right now. And I understand Tammy's point and James' point and Jackie's points, and I also understand Andrew's points. I understand going through the next almost 4 months and not being able to give instruction equally to everybody is a possibility and would be unfortunate. But I also understand Andrew's point that it's also 4 months that these kids aren't going to get back. So I think we should be doing at least something and not just reinforcing the things they learned in the previous terms of the year. Those are just my comments on that. So if you want to move forward on the memorandum,
Well,
unless someone else has another comment. Unless someone else has another comment.
I do not see any other hands raised.
Okay.
So moving on to the memorandum of agreement. And so my goal here again, if it's okay with the committee, I'll just kind of go through the points of each part of the memorandum, take questions as you have them, and then obviously we've worked together with the APC to come up with this, so I would be proposing an approval of the agreement. So point number 1, employees shall continue to receive their full pay and benefits. Employees will perform reasonable educational responsibilities related to their positions as defined by the Joint Labor Management Committee. In essence, the Joint Labor Management Committee is going to come up with that remote learning plan that we've been talking about. Employees engaged in performing reasonable educational responsibilities shall not need to utilize their personal accrued leave during time of the period of a school closure. Employees will not have any educational responsibilities during the planned April vacation. This has actually been, again, something that's been talked about across the state, really, and the general thought has been to maintain April vacation. And so that's what our agreement says, is that there'll still be an April vacation week, and say that no one has any responsibilities, kids or teachers or students during that time. Number 2, during the period of and after the school closure order is lifted, or June 25th, 2020, whichever occurs first, a bargaining unit member subject to a substantiated recommended self-quarantine or mandatory quarantine shall continue to receive their regular pay and benefits without deduction from the employee's accumulated contractual leave. The Joint Labor Management Committee shall define the terms of a substantial recommended self-quarantine. So this is saying that through June 25th, if someone is placed in quarantine or required to do self-quarantine, they'll receive their regular pay and benefits without having to use sick time. Number 3, in essence, says, maybe I won't read each one. Number 3, the summary, and if people want to raise their hand, they certainly can. Number 3 is just saying that stipend rolls will be paid. We actually generally pay those rolls in the first payroll in April, once in December, once in April, that the stipend people are going to continue to do their activities to the extent possible. Really, the question was spring coaches. We don't know if there's going to be a spring season. Right now, the MIAA is saying they want to have a spring season, that even if we go back on May 4th, they would have an abbreviated spring season. So we're saying if there is no spring season, coaches will not be paid. But if there's an abbreviated season, they'll get paid prorated based on the number of weeks that the season is. So we'll attack that as we go there. Number 4 and 5 kind of go together. It's about the evaluation process, and it might be better for me just to give a summary on this. The summary is that if you're a professional status teacher, if you're a teacher beyond your 3rd year and have professional status, that in essence, the evaluation process is going to be suspended during this time of the closure. So teacher, we're going to just not move forward in any piece of the evaluation process. And that makes sense in a lot of ways. So we're not, in essence, we're saying to teachers, we're not going to be evaluating on this kind of new world. Really, we're recreating the world of education and asking people to recreate and do things totally different. And, the online environment's going to be totally different than maybe what they're doing in their regular traditional classroom. We're not going to be evaluating people on their performance of that during that time. We're just asking everybody to work hard and do their best to make the transition to this environment. The only caveat here would be, for some reason someone just wasn't doing it, that would be viewed as a disciplinary issue, non-performance of duties versus evaluative. So obviously we could address a teacher who for some reason wasn't participating, but I'm not concerned about that, but obviously if that comes up, it's something we would address. The non-professional status teacher is a little bit different. So teachers in their first 3 years, they go through a process that at the end of the 3 years, they earn their professional status. And so we're saying for them, we need to continue the evaluation process because they want to move forward on that process. And then also there are situations where the administration may make a determination to non-renew a non-professional status teacher. So for both the EAPC, for the teachers and for the administration, there's a substantive reason to maintain the process moving forward. So for non-professional status teachers, we're saying they will get a summative evaluation that will be based upon the data collected prior to the school closure on March 13th. And then they'd also have the opportunity to submit evidence, which they would do in the normal evaluation process by May 1st. And so every non-professional status teacher will get a summative, and then based on that summative, they either move forward. So if they're in year 3 and the summative is proficient, and so they move on to year 4 and gain professional status. If they're year 2, they move on to year 3. If they're in year 1, they move on to year 2. But then also there is a possibility that a teacher in year 1, 2, or 3 could be non-renewed by June 15th. So the summary is professional status teachers were suspending the evaluation process at this time. Non-professional status teachers were amending it a little bit, changing some of the dates and saying that it's going to be based upon what happened prior to the school closure on March 13th, plus evidence submitted. Jason raised his hand. Jason.
What about improvement plans?
So if a teacher is on an improvement plan, they would get but the interesting part is at this time, we don't have a professional status teacher on an improvement plan.
Well, there you go. That works out then.
But we had a discussion about if there was a professional status teacher on it. Well, I think we changed the language here a little bit because the original language that we were talking about had some language about the teacher who was on an improvement plan. Then we've said at this time, we actually don't have a professional status teacher on an improvement plan. All right. Anything else?
Very fortunate.
Any other questions on 405? Slide down. Number 6. In essence, 6 has 2. But basically, if someone needs to take a leave that's under the current agreement for some reason, they would just notify the principal of that and go through the existing process to do that. The thing that's a little different here is there's a couple of teachers who had planned maternity leaves, and there's been some discussion about, based on working from home, there may be a teacher who's on a maternity leave who says, I can do this from home. I can do this online piece. And we actually are giving them the opportunity to make a choice of, yes, I'm on a maternity leave, but I'm going to do my online piece, and I'm going to, in essence, end my leave. And so I'm not going to use any more. Most of the teachers who are on maternity leave are using sick time if they have it. I'm not going to use any more of that leave time. Or they can choose to just stay on maternity leave. We do have a teacher who is considering, who is planning to start a leave of saying, I think that what we're talking about possibly doing is something I'll be able to do remotely from home, and she may not take her maternity leave. That's going to be the individual choice of teachers. But that, and obviously that deals with a very specific small number of people. But we wanted to let you know that was in there. Jason.
Would that teacher be, say school comes back May 4th, would that teacher be expected to be back in school on May 4th then, or would they go back on leave?
That's the interesting part of that. And I don't know if we actually discussed that as part of the agreement, because could the person defer back to their maternity leave if we end the remote responsibilities? I honestly, my opinion, this doesn't address that issue. And my general thought process would be, yes, I would allow them to go back to the leave if they chose to do that if we return to work on May 4th.
Okay, thanks.
Number 8, we've talked about a lot, just says there's going to be a joint labor management committee that's going to basically, the definition of reasonable educational responsibilities and is finalizing the remote learning plan. And then we'll continue to meet. Our thought process, at least in the beginning, was that group would meet once a week and kind of say, how are things going? What can we do better? What can we change? What can we do to best support teachers and students and the school community? Number 9 and 10 are pretty straightforward language of this doesn't constitute any past practice or precedent. And the agreement ends whenever we return to school or June 25th, whichever is earlier. And the only reference is back to paragraph 2. Paragraph 2 is that piece of if someone had to go into quarantine. They were saying if we came back to school and that person was in quarantine, that language says that they wouldn't have to use sick leave during that time through June 25th. That's why it makes that opening statement of, with the exception of paragraph 2. I think that's it. I'll take any questions, or otherwise, Andy, we can move to entertaining a motion. Jason.
Sorry, more questions.
First, get the motion out first if anyone would like to entertain that.
I'll propose a motion. I move that we approve the memorandum of agreement with the EAPC about the current school closure.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Questions, comments?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay, Jason.
With this last one, number 10, I just want to make sure the language is clear because, like it says, until the school closure is lifted or the end of the school year. So, like Carver closed before there was the school closure order. So, would there be a situation where the school closure is lifted, but Carver is still not open because, for whatever reason? Does that question make sense? Do you understand what I'm trying to ask?
Right. I think what you're asking is, say the governor says we can go back on May 4th.
Yeah.
And then the community says, hey, we're not ready to go back on May 4th. We're still out. And the Carver community says, we're not ready to send our kids back into school yet, because there's still a fear of the spread of COVID-19.
Yes.
In my mind, this is saying that is still in effect.
Okay.
So the school closure order, I guess, from my point, would be coming then from me and the committee versus the governor.
Okay, so when it says school closure order, that would be either from you or from the state.
That's how I would interpret that.
Okay, that as long as that's clear for everyone, then I'm good.
Okay, anybody else? Stephanie, James, Andrew? No? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Yeah, and just as a reminder, the recommendation on the online meeting is that be a roll call vote.
Oh, okay. Thank you for reminding me. So roll call for all those in favor of adopting the memorandum of agreement with the EAPC. Say aye. Stephanie?
I got to call on everybody individually, Andy.
Okay, yeah. Let me start with Jason then.
Aye.
Stephanie?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
James?
Aye.
And I am also an aye. It's unanimous. Thank you, everybody.
And I think that's all we have.
Yeah, we'll just have reports from the school committee if anybody has anything.
I just want to say that elementary caravan that went through was such a great idea, and I know it made the news everywhere, but my kid, I think we were one of the first stops out there, just the way the route went out, and the sheer number of people was great to see. So kudos to everyone who set that up. I think that was Mrs. DeMarsh really who took the lead on that, was what I heard. So that was great.
I apologize. I should have mentioned that up the top of some of the great things teachers were doing. That was clearly a great thing. So Renee DeMarsh organized that. And obviously, I believe there are 50 cars involved.
Yeah.
I also want to thank the Carver Police and the Carver Fire Department. We reached out to Chief Weston, Chief Dufley, because we were originally going to try to do it on Tuesday, and then that on Monday, the governor put out his order that to stay in place. We said that wouldn't make sense for us to do this while there's a stay in place. So we, both the Carver Police and Carver Fire also responded very quickly in helping organize that event and giving some, in essence, leading the caravan. So thank you to both of them.
Very good.
Tammy raised her hand, Andy. I don't know if you want to call on Tammy.
Yeah, Tammy, would you like to?
Yeah, I actually was thinking about that too after I spoke. I was like, oh, shoot, the caravan, because I was actually just sharing it with my friends at MTA. But also, I just want to put it out there that we actually are the model. There's been multiple districts that have been reaching out for suggestions and guidelines on putting their own caravans together. So I just want to put that out there because that wouldn't be something that people would know. And I think that's pretty cool. Thanks.
Thank you, Tammy.
James raised his hand, Andy.
Oh, James, you recognized.
Yeah, two things. I just wanted to put out there that both of my kids' teachers have all been really communicative on Jupiter Ed and have been reaching out. So I appreciate everything they're doing to try and even put the word out. Guidance has been putting out a word, and it's been nice for them at least to have to sort of check it to give them some sort of responsibility to maintaining what's going on with it. So I do appreciate everything that everyone is doing as well. And I just wanted to add that I sent a letter to the town clerk and rescinded my resignation for the last year. So I will stay on for the last year.
Very
Awesome.
good.
That's great.
Stephanie is raising her hand, Andy.
Okay, Stephanie?
Hello. I also stood out in the yard with my children and saw the caravan. It was amazing. It took over almost 5 minutes for them to go around our circle. It was really great to see how committed our teachers and our staff are to our community. It was just, I cried more than once just saying hi to people. It was just so wonderful. And I'm so appreciative of how hard everyone has worked. I know these are, unprecedented times, and I know that it's scary, it's overwhelming, it's uncertain for everyone. I have 2 students that have been homeschooling for the past 2 weeks, reviewing content, being given new content, using new, online learning. It has been a real struggle for us, but we're committed, to seeing things through. And I'm just very happy with how everyone in the Carver School District is working together and coming together. And I'm just appreciative of how hard everyone has worked. And I just want to say, everyone, it is going to be overwhelming at times. Just take a deep breath. We'll all get through this together, and we are stronger together. So I just encourage people that if you need help or if you have questions, to reach out, because everyone wants everyone to get through this in the best way that we can, and that we're all there for you. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for your commitment and for your time. And I know that Carver will be stronger on the other side of this. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Andrew?
I don't see any other hands raised, Andy.
Okay. I will finish then. I just want to say, again, thank you to all the staff and all the teachers and everybody in the community. As everyone else has said, the examples of the uplifting spirit of our community makes you warm inside. I couldn't be there for the caravan. I was working, but I saw the updates going on the Carver pages, and it made me smile. And you see a lot of that going on. You see the bear thing now, the bear hunt going out, in the community. And, I was going to go up and put a bear on top of my mailbox, but my wife said that was the wrong type of bear. So I didn't have a furry kind. Anyway, enough of that. But also, I want to thank our administration and especially Mr. Neef, Brad Meredith, everybody, Regina. When this was all going down, I was on the phone with them constantly, asking questions, and they really were there for the community 110%. And their dedication is something to be proud of. So thank you all for that.
Thank you, Eddie.
All right, so I'll take a motion to adjourn unless anybody wants to stay and just hang here for the rest of the night.
I'm good. I'll move to
Okay.
adjourn.
All right. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll move to adjourn.
Do I have a
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Roll call, right?
Oh, roll call, sorry.
They're asking
Roll
for
call.
all votes to be roll call votes.
Okay, I'll start with that. Aye. Jason?
Aye.
Stephanie?
Aye.
James?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. And also thank you, Catherine from the Carver Reporter for joining us as well.